What is going on, everyone? Welcome to this week's edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining. Really good show in store. We're going to touch on some of the biggest sort of developments of the last week, as we usually do, and then we're going to check in on the U.S. women's national team, how they are looking heading into the semifinals of the CONCACAF W Championship, as well as the Euros, what has happened this week, as we're getting some clarity as to kind of what this final match day is going to look like, and some more data on these teams and potentially how they're going to fare moving forward. And every time somebody plays, it feels like there's another twist in the tail. Your perceptions change a little bit. So we're going to talk about all of that, but we are going to start with two major developments. The first of which is Wayne Rooney, in very quick and impressive fashion, returning to DC United. It seems like this happened very, very quickly. All of a sudden, he was at the airport in DC, and all of a sudden, he was unveiled at a press conference in a matter of days. Obviously, there was some kind of communication before that, but this is the direction DC United are headed. And there are two main areas of criticism I've seen of this hire, and I want to debunk both of them. But first and foremost, it just needs to be acknowledged, this club needs excitement and energy and something interesting in the worst way possible. They have nothing to draw people to them, to Audi Field, in a market that, of course, is very competitive with all of the other teams. Now, they don't have many that are particularly great at the moment, but you are competing for attention because you are in a major sports city. It's not like you have one or two teams you're competing with. You're talking about the Capitals, the Nationals, the Commanders. You go down the list, and I feel like I'm missing another team. Oh, and the Wizards. That's the other team. The point being, you've got to be something special as DC United. You either have to be really good or you have to be really interesting to get people in that city to prioritize you over these other teams. For the last decade or so, that has not really happened. And the one time it did, it's because Wayne Rooney showed up. And Wayne Rooney did a terrific job, not only performing on the field and actually delivering tangible results, but being that ambassador and getting people to care. Partially because of his name and partially because what he was actually doing on the field. You know, you always have where he ran back 50 yards or whatever it was to make the slide tackle to set up Lucho Acosta's goal, that kind of stuff. He was invested in this club, and it showed. So before you even start talking about what this actually means, does it make sense, is it a good idea, I just want to take a second to consider the question, is there anybody who would have thought about taking this job that checks the marketing boxes and the excitement boxes the way Wayne Rooney does? Because to me, the answer is no. Because he's already been at this club, he's already familiar with the fans are familiar with him, and of course, he's Wayne Rooney. So regardless of the actual soccer part of it, and we'll get to that, and whether you think he is the right guy to turn this club around, there is something to be said for the fact that at least they're trying to do something to get themselves relevant again. Sometimes that is what you have to prioritize. And I'm not blaming DC United one bit if that was at least some of, if not a decent amount of, the thought process here. Because it doesn't matter if you get fourth in the East if you're not actually competing for MLS Cup and you don't have a team that's interesting, a team that's exciting, a team that gives people a reason to pay attention. Wayne Rooney showing up again gives people a reason to pay attention. On to the two areas of criticism I'm seeing a lot of. The first one is, and I think this is coming more from England, but this is a backward step for Wayne Rooney. A backward step for managing a team in administration that had no money in a very literal way and just got relegated to League One? Excuse me? And I am very proud of Wayne Rooney. In his press conference, that was part of what he said when asked about this. He said, yes, I understand. I've seen the criticism in England, and to me that is disrespectful to this league. Round of applause, bravo, Wayne Rooney, because you are spot on. Now, in a vacuum, sure, there's a case to be made moving from the championship to MLS as a step down. But that is completely ignoring the context in which Wayne Rooney found himself. He was managing a team of youth players without an owner and nobody pouring money into the club. He is now managing a storied MLS franchise. That is a huge step up. Okay, I would feel differently about this if it was West Brom, Huddersfield, potentially with what they did this year. But some of these teams who are actually consistently at the top of the championship. You even take away all the points Derby got knocked for the administration and the financial issues. They still weren't great. He was not managing a top-tier championship team. MLS is simply better. It is a better job. I don't want to hear otherwise. I'll listen to an argument, but I'm probably not going to buy it. The context of the situation has to matter. The second part of this is in the context of kind of looking at his managerial journey and comparing his path to some of the other players from his era that he played in the Premier League with or competed against internationally. Yeah, it does seem kind of strange to take MLS as that jumping point, though Patrick Vieira did. He's doing just fine for himself currently. It wasn't exactly a steady rise up for him, but now he's got Crystal Palace looking very promising with a bright future. But how did it work for Frank Lampard going from Derby County immediately to Chelsea? How did it work from Andrea Pirlo from going from no professional coaching experience to Juventus? How has it worked for Steven Gerrard when he started at Rangers and then went to Aston Villa? It's working pretty well. Now, Aston Villa, much more high profile than DC United, I get that. My point is simply, you got to give Wayne Rooney some credit for thinking this through and actually investing in his long-term future as a coach. Because I don't see Frank Lampard getting another run at the Chelsea job anytime soon. I mean, who knows 15 years from now? But it's not like he's bounced back in some uber impressive way at Everton. And I think he's done a better job. I feel like I have a higher opinion of what he did at Everton so far than most people. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But it's not the worst thing in the world to actually learn a little bit and set yourself up for success so that when you get the big job, you are actually prepared to manage it. You've seen different things. You've managed all kinds of different players. You've solved all kinds of different problems, encountered all of this stuff you need to work through, and have a really good feel for this, as opposed to just let's hire the guy with the big name. So that's the first criticism. The second is this idea of he's jumping right back to England as soon as he possibly can. This is very much a jumping off point. I'll be surprised if I saw people saying I'll be surprised if he makes it a year. He's gone after the World Cup. Yada, yada, yada. He said in his press conference he had interest from Europe and was planning to take a break until DC United reached out. Does that sound like a man who is simply looking at this as a short-term sort of ego reputation boost? That's a better way to put it. So that he can go running to get a quality championship job or a job in the Premier League as soon as possible. Does that sound like at least what Wayne Rooney is selling? And I have no reason to doubt Wayne Rooney. He could have left Derby at any number of points with how disastrous that club is right now. And he stuck it out, as I would argue, as long as he possibly could have, because he cared that much and he wanted to try and save him from getting relegated. I find it hard to believe he is going to just walk out on DC United after 6 months or a year. Is he going to be there forever? No, he made it very clear he wants to manage at the top level, and rightfully so. This is a learning experience and a growth opportunity to set him up for success to get that better job at some point down the road. So is he going to be there for a decade? No, probably not. And then also don't forget that his name was getting brought up with Everton when Frank Lampard got that job. And the reporting, at least the rumors, I don't know if it would go so far as to call it reporting, but there was speculation and people saying he had turned down an approach from Everton to at least talk about the job, that he simply wasn't interested. Once again, does this sound like a guy who is looking at DC United as a short-term solution to get him where he wants to be? To me, he checks every box for DC. I think this is a home run. He is going to get you the eyeballs, the entertainment value, people talking about the club again. You don't have anything to lose, so you might as well take a chance on an inexperienced manager. And it looks like this guy can really coach. You can't deny the body of work he put together at Derby. What he did was somewhere between impressive and incredible to give them even a fighting chance to stay up and avoid relegation. With, again, essentially a team of youth guys, academy products, because they didn't have money to go buy anybody better. And that team had some incredibly impressive wins over some of the best teams in the championship last season. This is not just a publicity stunt. Wayne Rooney has done more from a coaching resume standpoint, I would argue, than Frank Lampard did when he got the Chelsea job. Some people might disagree with that. Lampard certainly had more success. I mean, he got his team to the championship playoff. But the situation he was put in was so different. He's done plenty more than Andrea Pirlo did when he got the Juventus job. I don't see any reason why he can't actually start turning this thing around. And you've got some DP slots you can use. Seems they're going to be active in this transfer window and make a push to try and get in the playoffs. I'm skeptical that happens. But at least you're trying to build something toward next season where you can hit the ground running and be a playoff contender. And if this works, to me, there's every chance his next job is one in the Premier League. And ultimately, my guess is he wants the Manchester United job, or potentially the England job. There's going to be at least another step in between those. But he turned down his boyhood club, said he wasn't interested in that job. He was planning, at least reportedly that is how that went. He was planning to take a break, despite the fact he had offers from Europe, until DC United called. That doesn't sound like a guy who was just trying to find any way to sort of keep himself relevant and get the shortest route to the top. That sounds like a guy who understands he is a young coach with plenty to learn, who is willing to bet on himself in the sense that he doesn't need to take the first great opportunity that jumps at him if it doesn't feel quite right. That he can slowly build this thing so that when he gets the job he really, really wants, he is prepared and he does it well. To me, this is a perfect fit for everybody. And I would not be surprised if DC, by this time next year, is significantly better. And we are talking about Wayne Rooney as a very, very good coach. We haven't seen his body of work just isn't big enough yet to figure out exactly what kind of coach he is. But the early returns have been awfully impressive. And now he's got a chance to do it at a higher level with less eyeballs, less pressure at DC United. The other big piece of news that became official just today, Wednesday, is Raheem Sterling moving from Manchester City to Chelsea. This has been in the works for weeks. It was just a matter of getting everything finalized, all the details sorted out. That has now happened. He is with Chelsea. He sent out his thank you, Manchester City. Chelsea have unveiled him. And I'm just always fascinated and enjoy talking about Raheem Sterling because if it's possible for a player to both be underappreciated and overrated, I think Raheem Sterling is at the top of that list for me. He has dealt with so much nonsense and ridiculousness throughout his career, and yet has still managed, at the age of 27, to be in the top 30 in Premier League history in goals and in the history of the English men's national team. I pointed out in my England preview that dropped today for the World Cup, no player in England has played more minutes at major tournaments since the 2014 World Cup than Raheem Sterling. Raheem Sterling averaged 15 goals and 7 assists per Premier League season in his time at Manchester City. The most he started was 31 games. So yes, he got plenty of playing time. He was in that 20 to 30 range pretty much every season. From 2017-18 through 2019-20, he had 55 goals and 21 assists in the Premier League. He is a very, very, very good player who has been indispensable to his country. At a time when England has not had a lot of impressive wingers, he has been the one rock-solid, reliable source. And don't forget that run he had in that 1920 range where there was some real conversation about whether we needed to consider him a truly world-class player and among the best in the world. I was always skeptical of that for reasons I'm going to get to in a minute, but that is the level he reached at one point. And he just produces year after year after year. Now the overrated part. Over the last 5 seasons, he has outperformed his stats bomb expected goals. That's where I got these numbers from. Thank you, Football Reference. By 2. A total of 2. 3 of those 5 seasons, his expected goals total was higher than his actual goal tally. This is all just in the Premier League. To put that in perspective, Riyad Mahrez, in the same time in the Premier League, outperformed his by 15.3. And I just used Mahrez as an example of another winger who doesn't start every game at a high, very high level, right, in a elite club. Of course, they were teammates for, basically this entire stretch. I believe Mahrez's stats include 1 year at Leicester before he moved. But the point being, they're in very similar spots. That is a difference. Again, Sterling outperformed his XG by 2, Riyad Mahrez outperformed his by 15.3. And maybe Mahrez isn't the best example just because of how good he is curling shots with his left foot and scoring at what should be a low XG, right? His level of difficulty on goals is fairly high because he's so good at that particular shot, and that's one of the things that makes him so dangerous is he's just, he's got a world-class left foot. But when you go back and look at so many of Raheem Sterling's goals, before we even get to the misses, so much of it is poaching, right? It's tap-ins, it's being in the right spot, which is important. But a lot of it was created through the Manchester City system. You don't see as much individual creativity and individual moments as you do for a Mahrez or a Kevin De Bruyne, or you can go down the list. And then there is the reality, and this is why I wanted to go to the expected goals to see if my theory about this was correct. Because outperforming it by 2 sounds great, but the reality is expected goals totals just across the board are lower than you would think. Very rarely is the XG of a game higher than the actual score because, of course, these are the best players in the world. So being above it by 2 over 5 seasons is way below the average. And to me, that is a commentary on A, the kind of scoring chances he gets, because so many of them are right in front of the net, and B, that he struggles to finish sometimes. And it's easy to point to, him with a couple high-profile misses and snowball into this narrative of he can't finish, he's a bad finisher, which goes back to this underappreciated, overrated, and all the nonsense he's had to deal with. And a lot of it's off the field stuff that has nothing to do with any of this. But there is some truth to the idea that he is not somebody that finds a way to score goals on those half chances kind of out of nothing, which is something you want if this player is going to be one of your focal points scoring. He never really was that at City. I mean, he scored 20 goals in the Premier League in a season. But at no point did it feel like he was the true... Again, that was when the world-class discussion started. But did it ever really feel like he was sort of anchoring City's attack? And part of that is just the reality that he had so many great players around him that it never feels like anybody is anchoring City's attack. It's a little bit of a different situation at Chelsea right now, which is where this gets real interesting, and Raheem Sterling is going to cement his sort of reputation and legacy one way or another with this move. Because either he's going to be scoring 20 goals a season with that added responsibility and the added opportunities, being one of the key guys as opposed to a great player in a great system with all these interchangeable parts. Or he's going to be more of the 15 goals a season guy and not live up to what Chelsea need him to be. Make no mistake about it, though. He is a significant upgrade over the options they have out wide right now. The numbers will tell you that. The only one who's really close to him production-wise is Christian Pulisic, and Christian Pulisic has battled injury after injury after injury. Has never been a week-in, week-out starter. When you're looking at, and specifically when you're talking about Ziyech as kind of the other guy there. I'm taking Mason Mount out of this because Mason Mount doesn't play the same position. So this is a significant upgrade. This makes Chelsea better and gives them another weapon in attack that is better than the ones they have. I'm not convinced he's the actual answer to Chelsea's problems offensively and what they need, though. If you're pairing him with another goal scorer or a terrific creator, then we're talking. But right now you're pairing him with Ziyech, a maybe, depending on if he's there by the start of the season. Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Pulisic, and Mount, who was spectacular last season. Which one of those guys are you looking at saying, that's your Mo Salah, your Sergio Aguero in years past for Manchester City, now you're Erling Haaland, your Harry Kane. You can go down the list. That guy who you know is going to carry your attack. And for a Chelsea team that has struggled to create chances, and sometimes struggled to convert those chances they did create. Raheem Sterling is not the guy that's going to fix that problem. He is much more of a finisher than he is a creator. And yes, his assist numbers are very good. Again, part of that is when you play in City's system, the ball moves so fluidly, and you are able to, he can just drive to the end line and cut the ball back. And you're staring at an open net because the goalkeeper is now frozen. That is so much of what City does. So I'm fascinated to see what kind of numbers Raheem Sterling puts up in a completely different system with a completely different role. Overall, to me, it's a good, like I've said, it makes Chelsea better. I'm all for the signing. I am just not convinced it's going to end up being everything from a wage standpoint they are paying for and what they are hoping he is in terms of trying to turn this team around quickly and get them back to being a real threat to win a Champions League, to contend for a Premier League title above all else, because that's where they really came up short last season. And especially with what the other teams around them have done. This is trying to sort of play catch up and stay afloat rather than getting ahead. When you look at Haaland, Nunez, all of the moves Spurs have made, Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal, who may not be done in the transfer window. They've already done some business. This is very much Chelsea trying to play catch up and improving the attack. It is an upgrade. My question is whether he can be a real needle mover or not. And he's going to have to convince me that he can be, because my inclination is that he's a good player who makes Chelsea better, but he isn't actually the solution to the problem. He's not what's going to get them where they want to be. We're going to take our first break here. When we come back, we're going to check in on the U.S. women's national team now that they are to the semifinals of the CONCACAF W Championship, and recap some Euros action, all kinds of fascinating results and things to get into there as well. So you won't want to miss any of that. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. We're going to do some women's soccer check-in stuff here with so many important tournaments going on simultaneously. First, haven't talked about the U.S. women's national team in a little bit, so I wanted to do that. 1-0 win over Mexico to close out the group stage of the CONCACAF W Championship. Heading into this game, it was almost a guarantee the U.S. was going to win the group. They would win the group with a draw. Ended up getting all 3 points to finish a perfect 3-0 in the group stage. It was not a pretty performance. This was the Mexico team at least I expected to show up from the beginning of this tournament. I always had this game circled as the first one where I really felt like we were going to have any chance of learning something about where this U.S. team is at. And then Mexico promptly went and lost their first two group stage games. But they showed up against the U.S. and deserve an immense amount of credit for the performance they put in. So this was definitely the best test the U.S. has had so far. The goal comes in the dying minutes of the game. I'm still surprised it stood. It looked like, to me, Emily Sonnett was offside. And the amount of goals that have gotten disallowed in those kind of situations is incredible to me. It just seems like we don't take clear and obvious error literally. So I have stopped trying. I've given up on that fight. In my head, that was not a clear and obvious error. But based on all of the past experience we have here, all the precedent, I was surprised Christy Munoz' goal stood. But it did. The ball gets chipped in. Sonnett sends it toward goal. It sort of pops up in the air, and Christy Munoz bunkles it over the line with her knee and gets the U.S. all 3 points. Only a few truly notable moments in this game. Like I said, it was not a good performance, particularly going forward. Midge Purce hits the post in the 15th minute, and so you start thinking, okay, maybe they've got something going offensively. And it kind of died out. Then Midge Purce had a phenomenal run at the end of the first half. She picked the ball up near midfield, just completely what's the word I'm looking for here? Dismissed the first Mexican defender and then blew by the second. I mean, just nobody could stay in front of her. And so she gets to the end line. She cuts it back in. It falls to Lindsay Horan, who has a really good, clean look at goal and just doesn't get much on the shot. And then 72nd or so minute, don't remember off the top of my head if that was exactly when it was, Mexico picks up the red card for a nasty challenge on Rose Lavelle's ankle. But then Mexico felt more dangerous after the red card, which is, to me, the biggest concern out of all of this. In no way, shape, or form should a team playing with 10 and a team that is not among the world's very best be able to, and now it's not like Mexico came all that close to scoring, but in a game that was tied at that point, it felt as balanced as it had at just about any point in the game. And there is no way that should have happened. But ultimately, Christy Munoz steps up, gets the winner, and the U.S. prevail. And after these shaky performances, I've seen plenty of, we want the old U.S. WNT back, concerns about the attack. And here's what I would say to that. First of all, Vlatko Andonovski is correct when he said, we are not ready for the World Cup now. To me, that has become abundantly clear so far in this tournament. And in the build-up games to Colombia. Because being the best team in CONCACAF, which Canada will have something to say about that still, and being ready for a World Cup are two different things. It is one of the challenges that will always come with being in this qualifying region. There is a very good Mexican team on the men's side, a fairly good one on the women's side, and now Canada, both on the men's and women's side, is providing very good opposition as well. But other than that, you are hard-pressed to be going up against the teams that are ultimately your equals or superiors when it gets to the World Cup. The kind of teams you're going to see in the knockout round specifically. So that's part of this. The other thing is, we also need to remember that this team is currently breaking in 2 new center backs. Now, only one of them is typically starting at a time. One of them would start, I would expect, it's going to be Alana Cook and Becky Sauerbrunn in a potential championship game. So it's not like you're starting 2 brand new center backs. But you have 2 center backs playing key roles in this tournament who are, relatively speaking, new. You're bringing in a brand new left back who's going to be your starter for the next decade. Julie Ertz is not available, so Andy Sullivan is playing a much more important role than she ever has before as that holding midfielder. And yes, I know Mal Pugh's been around this team for a long time, despite the fact she's still super young because she broke in at such a young age. But she has never carried this kind of responsibility, and Sophia Smith is just starting her international career. Those are now key players for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are theoretically starters if everybody is healthy and you've got a must-win game. This is a new era. It is going to take time. This is not the well-oiled machine where you had, an inner prime Alex Morgan, plus Megan Rapinoe, who was still at the edge of her prime, plus Rose Lavelle and Lindsay Horan coming through, plus Julie Ertz, plus all this experience at center back, plus Kelly O'Hara. You can go down the list, right? There was kind of this group that had been together for the last 4 to 8 years, and now we're getting into that next rendition. Megan Rapinoe is playing exclusively off the bench pretty much, at least for the purposes of a preferred 11. She is going to be on the bench. It was unclear whether Alex Morgan was really going to be the number 9, and now Ashley Hatch is hurt, so Alex Morgan is going to be the number 9, and has been playing well, so she's helping her case in that sense as well. But this is not the best this team is going to look, because this team is just getting used to each other. Additionally, the other point I will make is I would be more concerned about this team if the defense was shaky. The defense has been rock solid all tournament long. Every center back that's went out there has been very, very good. Kelly O'Hara's been good. Emily Sonnet's been good. I'm a huge Emily Fox fan. You have never been concerned about the back line. Now, of course, the question is, okay, what happens when you go up against better competition? You saw Mexico was able to give them a little bit more trouble, but they still didn't come close to scoring a goal. And then you take that and you look at what is happening at the Euros. And now there are a couple teams in particular we're going to get to in a little bit here that have been very, very good defensively. But Norway just gave up 8 goals in a game. The Netherlands have had some struggles defensively. And throughout qualifying, they just have struggled defensively. You look at what happened to Sweden. No, more Netherlands than Sweden, but you get the point. There have been some shaky defensive performances by teams that are supposed to be right there with the U.S. competing to be the best team in the world. Again, they're playing better opposition because there's so much more depth in Europe. But there are teams that can be got at defensively, and right now it does not look like the United States is one of them. So offensive problems can be fixed. This team is super talented. There's so many options going forward. It's just going to take some time. The other part of this that needs to be remembered is the simple reality that the rest of the world is catching up to the U.S. It is simply not fair to expect this team to dominate the way they've been expected to for the past decade or so. Just go look at that list that I referenced when we were talking before the Euros that ESPN put together. It was a poll. Vlatko Andonovski voted, but it was a lot of also some European journalists. They got a whole collection of people. Europe does not think incredibly highly of this U.S. team right now. I believe Katerina Macario was the highest-ranked U.S. player at 6. And then the next one wasn't for a while. I could be wrong on that. but it was something in that ballpark. There is very much a belief, at least among some people, and I saw Grant Wall talk to Alex Morgan about this, that these top European teams are better than the U.S. I'm not there yet. That's why I'm so excited about this World Cup we've got coming next year. But there does need to be an acknowledgement that we are getting very close, if we're not already there, to this idea of there is not one clear favorite entering a tournament. There are 5+ teams that could win a World Cup. Not 2, 3, 4 maybe. And the rest of the teams in CONCACAF are getting better. So you're not going to waltz to a bunch of 5-0 wins anymore. So there is plenty of time to build this thing toward the World Cup. Remember, this is a young team. Remember, everybody else is getting better. And now the job is take care of the semifinals. Hopefully you get a matchup with Canada. And then, based on that game, we can start talking if we need to reconsider anything I just said. Speaking of the Euros, England did a thing, a historic thing. 8-0 over Norway, most lopsided game in the history of the Euros, men's or women's, which is remarkable in and of itself. And then the fact that it was against Norway, who certainly was supposed to be the second best team in that group, who looked better than England game one, who have two of the best 5 to 10 players in the world, depending on who you're asking. And, I mean, England just ripped them apart. It was incredible how much open space there was. Beth Mead gets her hat trick. She is playing out of her mind right now. She has been just sensational. Ellen White scores twice, so now your striker is in form, as if they needed another attacking player playing really well with what you've gotten from Fran Kirby and Lauren Hemp and Beth Mead. That team that showed up in Game 2 is the clear favorite in this tournament. I did not think we were going to be talking about that. I said the opposite thing on Monday in the weekend roundup, that I got no clue what happens next. None of these teams have been uber impressive. There's one that now we've seen them play a second game I'm also feeling very confident in. We're going to talk about them next. But if England plays that way, that's your team to beat. That was not the team that showed up in Game 1, though. I don't know if that was and this is what we're going to have to learn once we get to the knockout rounds, if that was oh my goodness, we're playing at a Euros where we might actually win at home, or if that was this game against Norway, for whatever reason, was just the most bizarre aberration in the history of the Euros. And we're going to get back more to the point where it was a gritty 1-0 they had to really just kind of drag out. So we'll see. But I was looking for somebody to make a statement and sort of announce their arrival as every bit as good as advertised. England certainly did that and then some with what they did to Norway. The other team that I've been really impressed with is Germany. Germany got a 2-0 win over Spain, albeit, yes, a depleted Spain, but still a very good Spain. And, goalkeeping mistake leads to the first goal. It was just not a good day for Spain. But Germany capitalized. They now have a 6-0 combined scoreline in their first two games. Both opponents are ranked in the top 15 in the FIFA Women's World Rankings. Top 15. Their defense has been rock solid. I mentioned both England and Germany have looked really good at the back. The midfield, particularly the two attacking midfielders, have been sensational. The wingers have also been really productive, and you're getting additional production from that number 9 position. There is just no hole to poke in this team right now. Everybody is playing at a high level. You feel good about every single part of the field. And for Spain, there's always going to be an asterisk to this tournament because you don't have Jennifer Hermoso and Alexei Putellas. But at some point, you've got to get over this mental hurdle and really, if this team, and I'm sort of throwing Barcelona in there with the Spanish national team, obviously they're two different things, but they're so intertwined because of the roster similarities. If this group of players is truly the best in the world and superior to everybody else in a clear way that is indisputable, at some point they need to show it. Because one Champions League against a Chelsea team that hadn't been there before is not enough. You've obviously got plenty of time to continue to grow in this, both club and internationally. But this is quickly turning into another incredibly disappointing showing for this group of players. No need to panic. Most of that was self-inflicted against Germany. They can certainly do much better. But it's to the point where we got to start wondering kind of what the perception, the narrative surrounding this team is going to be exiting this tournament, whether that is sooner than we thought, in the semifinals, in the quarterfinals, whatever it might be. There's a very interesting conversation to be had about Spain. Okay, so I want to run through these groups real quick to sort of set the stage for what's going to happen next, because we've got some very interesting things that are happening here. So here's Group A right now. Of course, England would have to do something horrifically bad to end up anywhere other than first place in this group. And now Norway is staring at a very real possibility of exiting this tournament in the group stage. They have work to do against Austria because of that goal difference, because the fact that Austria really gave England issues. Now, the good news is you've got that head-to-head in that final game. So if you win, you're going through. But Norway has to, look at that goal difference. That is not what this was supposed to look like heading into the final game. Here's Group B, highlighted how impressed I've been by Germany. And Spain, again, similar position to Norway. Denmark is the final game for Spain. So you do have the benefit of, Germany destroyed Denmark. Spain hung in there better against Germany, so you've got that goal difference edge. But you got to take care of business in this final game, or you're going home in the group stage too. This tournament it's absolutely fascinating the way the schedule played out and the way the results have played out. That because you could have gone through and picked, and you said, okay, there's a clear, especially Group A, clear 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe you argue Norway's better than England, but I don't think many people were doing that. So you go, can Austria find a way? Well, Austria has the opportunity. Same thing with this group. I mentioned it before. 3 of the top 15 teams in the world. Germany and Spain, clear 1, 2. How is that going to play out? Can Denmark play spoiler? Denmark absolutely has that opportunity when they get Spain in the final group stage game. Then we go to Group C. And, the Netherlands tie Sweden. They both take care of business in less convincing fashion. So they are tied atop the group and are in very good position to both go through as expected. Hannah Bennison came off the bench and scored a screamer to give Sweden a win over Switzerland. Switzerland fought tooth and nail. Very, very admirable performance by the Swiss. And Bennison you just don't see a ball struck that cleanly very often. It was a rocket. And then the Netherlands, albeit a banged-up Netherlands, go up 2-0 early, then give up 2 goals, and then find a winner in the second half to get the 3-2 win over Portugal without Vivian Miedema, who tested positive for COVID-19, unfortunately, to add to the injuries they've already suffered. They are just depleted, and it's a real shame because they're very, very good, and I want to see them at full strength, obviously, heading into the later rounds of this tournament. Maybe they'll get closer. They should get Mitoma back at some point. We'll see how serious the injuries are. But for the meantime, they are down key players, but are in very, very good position. Something would have to go pretty bad for them not to at least get through, and the way the group stage has gone for them, I think that's about all you can ask. So nothing surprising in Group C. And then we got Group D, the only group who has not played that second game yet. France, as I mentioned, very, very impressive win over Italy. France, clearly the best team in this group, so far have showed it. There's an argument they've been the most impressive team so far. I want to see them do it against better competition before I jump to that conclusion. But that is where things stand in Group D. We're going to take one final break, come back with the way we end every show, our weekend look ahead, talking about the biggest matchups this weekend across the soccer world. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back one final time to the Touchline Talk show. We're going to jump right into our weekend look ahead, starting with Major League Soccer, kind of rivalry week part 2. This is just a phenomenal 2-week stretch, and there are so many storylines with these games that make it even better. You know, sometimes we just have these rivalries. It's Dallas, Houston, and both teams are struggling. Now you've got the debut of Hector Herrera and FC Dallas up there near the top of the Western Conference. And coming off of that game, FC Dallas now get to host Austin as sort of a double rivalry situation here. Austin, by the way, unbeaten since the start of June and currently winning the Supporters' Shield. Now, there are some caveats there in terms of points per game and games played. I am a firm believer in points per game. But the reality is you got to actually pick up the points for those games in hand. And right now, Austin has accumulated more points than any other team in Major League Soccer. They got through that little bit of a rough patch and are playing really, really well. They've got multiple offensive weapons. They are just rock solid. Josh Wolf is doing a tremendous job. It is very rare you see this kind of improvement from year 1 to year 2. But my goodness, they are playing well. They are 100% legit. Then that's games on Saturday. Then you've got Orlando at Atlanta on Sunday. Atlanta United, you just want the season to be over for them. Winless in 4 as the injuries continue to mount. Joseph Martinez had plenty of things to say after they got handled by Austin. It just gets worse and worse and worse. At some point, you got to start making up this gap to try and get back in the playoff conversation. Got to win your home games. We'll see if they can do that. Then, NYCFC at New York Red Bulls. NYCFC snapped their 4-game stretch without a win, getting a 4-2 victory over New England that had all kinds of controversy and drama. So they got back into the win column. These are 2 of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. It's probably going to be neck and neck right till the end. These are the kind of games that could decide it. Really, really looking forward to that one. And then you got Cincinnati at Columbus. First meeting between these teams this season. They are right there on the dividing line of the playoffs. There's 1 point between them. This is everything you could ask for in a rivalry game. And it should be noted, all of this information I just threw out there, of course, is before tonight's games that are either underway, about to get underway, getting underway the next hour or so. So the table will look a little bit different heading into the weekend. But huge game in Columbus between the two Ohio teams. And then at the Euros, sort of mentioned part of this when we were breaking down the Euros, and I want to just kind of go through what group is on each day here. So tomorrow, Thursday, Italy, Iceland, France, Belgium, match day 2 for Group D. And then we get into the final match day for the group stage. Friday, Group A, Northern Ireland, England. Not only does it have to go horribly wrong for England, it has to go horribly wrong for England against Northern Ireland. And I just don't see any way in the world that comes close to happening. The big one, Norway, Austria. One of those teams goes through, one of those teams go home, and it's all coming down to that game. Saturday, Finland, Germany, Denmark, Spain. Same thing, Denmark, Spain. Very much looks like one team goes home, one team stays, barring something unforeseen. So that is the game to pay attention to there. And then Sunday, Group C wraps up. Switzerland, Netherlands, Sweden, Portugal. You would assume Netherlands, Sweden take care of business. All they need is draws. They're very much in the pole position right now. But this could get real wild if both upsets are pulled and you got a bunch of teams sitting there with 4 points. So we will see. But there have not been too many surprises so far at this tournament in that regard of actual upsets being pulled like that. So there's plenty to play for this weekend at the Euros. That is all we have for the show this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Check out the written work I've done, touchlinetalk.substack.com. Subscribe there as well. And we'll be back Monday to recap what should be a very exciting weekend. Until then, stay safe, watch some soccer, and have fun.